When you're young, you sort of take it all in your stride, but knowing something, was happening, obviously, and very concerned about the grown-ups, of the way they were speaking. And
I must have picked up on all these things, although I was only 6. And I always said my prayers when I went to bed, and I can remember saying, please God, don't let there be a war.
We were told to listen to the radio at 11 o'clock. I heard Chamberlain speaking on the radio to say we were at war with Germany. It was quite a frightening thing because we just didn't understand, and I was only 14.
This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
And we just sat there, not knowing what to do, really. So we didn't go to church or anything.
we lived in a Darlington Road, and in those days you just had a front forecourt with metal railings, and lorries came round and collected all the metal for the war effort.
We had to blacken all our windows, and we had to get lots of black curtaining.
Shelters were being built and gas masks, and babies had baby gas masks. And
I was evacuated on the Friday before the war started. They were horrible. At one stage, I had to go to hospital to have my tonsils done. And they said, when you come out of hospital, we're throwing you out because we don't want you anymore. So I wrote and told my mum. She was down there the next day. Get packed, we're going home. So I never got my tonsils done, ever.
If during the war you had more than one house and any of them weren't occupied, they were like country cottages, the government took them and put evacuees in them. And we turned into this road and they said, right, that's you in there. And so we had one of these houses just for ourselves.
Well, my father was in his mid-30s when it started, and he was in the food industry at the Danish Bacon Company, so he didn't go to war, but he joined the Home Guard, and he also had to do fire watching, so he was very seldom. He was at home, but nothing really happened for the first couple of months. You know, the end of our road was the Eastney Barracks, where the Royal Marines were. And if the wind was in the right direction, we could hear over their megaphone a red warning, and then it would come over a double red warning, so we could hear that.
You could hear the drone of the planes coming over, then you'd hear the gunfire. And even today, if we get a thunderstorm, I think about that. It worries me.
The Anderson shelters were built in back of our garden, and they were steps down into it.
Inside you had sort of like bunk beds, and each family was issued with a tin of dry biscuits and survival kit. And there was, and we used to have a stove down there, a paraffin stove.
It was always smelt dank and what have you, and my mother had put blankets and things on the bunk beds, but then when the rain came, it used to fill up with water.
Yeah, horrible really.
Next door to us was an elderly lady, and I don't know why, but she had loads and loads of OXO cubes. She always used to keep them down there. She called over the fence and said, "Come and look at this." And all these OXO cubes were all floating in about 2 foot of water. So I don't know, and we just all laughed about that.
I hated going in that shelter though. This man next door, he was continually saying, "Shh, listen, shh, listen." Driving you mad, because you could tell whether they were German planes or not. Dawn, it's a dawn here, it's a dawn here.
If the siren did go, they opened up the door of the ballrooms into the next room. They had a billiard table. And I don't know, well, not too many people will have crawled under a billiard table in this day and age. But even as a kid, you've got to go low, otherwise you bash your head. But that was our air raid shelter, and we all crouched up together.
We had been bombed out in the house that we lived in before the war. It was while I was still evacuated, she managed to find this little 2 up, 2 down house. And I can't remember what happened to the wall. All I know is that we just had a tarpaulin. Because there was no wall upstairs, Mum and I were sleeping in the front room downstairs. This one night, Mum said, wake up, the warning's gone." So we got dressed quickly and out into the street, and the man next door said, "That's all right, Mrs. Allpress, that was the all clear." And we slept through the raid. We must have been exhausted.
January the 10th, I'll always remember it. The whole of Portsmouth was afire on the Guildhall and the bombing. It was terrible.
Well, we just stood at the door. They came over and then they sort of went back down to Portsmouth, completely aglow all over. And then you could see it when they bombed Southampton as well. You saw that.
We were woken up, well, my mother was woken up and by a policeman saying you have to get out because there's an unexploded bomb in the road next to you. My grandmother, who is blind, she was living in the house next to us. So my mother had to go and get my grandmother, and we'd just get to the bottom of the road, and the policeman was going to let us through. And my grandmother said, "Florrie, I've got to go back." "Well, what's up?" "I've left my teeth in a jar."
One morning when I got up, went out into the scullery, and Mum said, "Oh, look what Lenny's done, he's put his foot through the bread bin." And I looked at it and I said, "I don't think so." Lifted the lid up because there was a hole, and there was a lump of shrapnel about that long, all twisted. I looked up and there was a hole in the ceiling.
My dad went to work early in the morning on his bike, and he always brought me home lots of shrapnel. And the time I got it, lunchtime, it was still warm.
The rations really were very little food in the way of rations, enough to keep us all alive. But I don't think it really harmed us, because I've lived this long, and my sister also made 100.
We had 2 ounces of butter, 2 ounces of lard, 2 ounces of sugar. We might have had a bit more sugar, but we had 2 ounces of tea, 2 ounces of everything almost.
Well, I never went hungry. I had a fairy bicycle that I used to cycle to the shops, and I'd queue up and get the meat ration with the ration books, and then take that home. Then I'd go out and get the vegetables.
You never had bananas, you didn't really know what bananas were.
It was a birthday party coming up, and my mum said, "Oh, well, we'll have a party." And I said to Mum, "Well, we've got nothing to have a party with." So she said, yes, we have. We've got loads of raspberries growing in the garden. And so we have raspberry jelly, raspberry cake, and everything was made of raspberries. But we had a lovely party, yes.
She used to buy a chicken from the kosher butchers. I suppose she'd boil it and make soup. And she used to make her own pasta. I can see her now. She used to roll it out and cut it into strips so it'd be like tagliatelle. And she'd hang it over the back of the kitchen chairs to dry. But that chicken used to do very well with a cooked dinner and then soup. And as I said, we weren't hungry.
Opposite us, there was Mrs. Joyous, and she had 3 sons. They were farmers. She's, have quite a big ration of meat each week. And we had a spaniel, Jeannie, and she was a thief. And one day she came herring in with a huge joint of beef, or meat or whatever it was, and laid it at my mum's feet. And Mrs. Giles came out very soon after and said, your dog's pinched my meat. So my mum gave her our joint, and she washed that one off, and we had theirs. So we dined very well.
My uncle had a farm, so we had rabbit pie, rabbit roasted, and pigeon pie, which is unknown for now, but you had that to make it up for what we didn't get in rations.
But I didn't have an unhappy childhood. I was very happy. Over the weekend, my school had been bombed, so I didn't go to school, start school until I was 7. That's why I'm so thick now.
We all put a penny each, and that made a shilling for 12 of us. And 2 mums stood on the 2 pavements turning it, and we were all skipping in the street. The kids don't know what they're missing these days.
It was a great spirit in the war. It really was. You didn't realise anything was happening, until bombs and things like that. When the doodlebugs were coming over, it was very frightening because you just didn't know where they were going to fall. All the while the engines were going and you could hear it, but when it stopped, you didn't know where it was going to land. And that was the frightening thing about it. You just didn't know at all.
Me and my brother, we were standing at the front door and we saw this plane came over it was on fire. And I said to him, whoever's in there doesn't stand a chance. And we saw it come down. And then on the news the next morning we realised it was the first doodlebug. Bit of history, innit? See the first doodlebug come over.
One afternoon, it was a lone bomber. There was no air raid, there was nothing, and it dropped a bomb. And the bomb seemed to travel a little way underneath the aeroplane. And since after the war, I did find out that was a landmine.
It's so strange that I had 4 brothers, 2 brothers-in-law, all fighting. And they all came home. And my poor aunt and cousin, they were on their own. And my cousin Rosie, she was 18, out every night, and her mum said to her, I get fed up sitting here by myself, why don't you stop in for a night? And so she stopped in and they were killed in a raid, both of them. It was very sad.
D-Day was planned in Southwark and we knew nothing about it, naturally. We didn't know what was happening, with all the cars going by, and it just didn't seem possible that in Southwark itself because it's such a little place that so many people were about. When I was coming home from work, I had to stop behind the bus, and the bus couldn't move because you saw all these cars. First one was Eisenhower. He was in one car. Then Winston Churchill was in another. And then you had all the other Army, Navy and Air Force chiefs, passed by. And it happened a few times to me, and you got that you really didn't take much notice of it.
The whole of that road, when we woke up in the morning, was bung full of military vehicles with soldiers and sailors and other people on board. And they were waiting for the ships to come into the shore so they could wade out to it to go and start D-Day. And I can still see now in my mind's eye of a soldier in the window waving and waving back at me and the twins.
All these troops, and they were so happy, bless them. And they didn't know what was going on either. But when I went one day, they were there, and then a few days after, they were gone.
D-Day has come. Early this morning, the Allies began the assault on the northwestern face of Hitler's European fortress. Under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied naval forces, supported by strong air forces, began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast of France.
The word went round that there was something going on, and because all the ambulances were in the city, going to St Mary's and also going to the station and going to St James's. So we knew something was afoot, but I knew that it had started, or the beginning of the end of the war had started.
I knew all along we would win. Never occurred to me that we wouldn't.
To the end of the war, it sort of all died off. We didn't have the bombing raids.
The commanders of the German forces opposing Field Marshal Montgomery's 21st Army Group have come to this headquarters today to surrender.
We'd been up to Trafalgar Square and listened to Churchill's speech, and he said, May the 8th. So we all went up, all the family, to Buckingham Palace, stood outside the railings, clinging on and saying, we want the King, we want the King. And Mum had got separated from me and my sister. So we were shouting, we want our Mum, we want our Mum.
Yesterday morning at 2:41 a.m., the representative of the German High Command signed the act of unconditional surrender of all German land, sea and air forces in Europe. We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing. Advance Britannia! Long live the cause of freedom! God save the King!
Yes, we heard Winston Churchill's speech and we were all very excited. And I said to my mum, are we going to have a party? Could we get some flags? My mum said, yes, of course we can. You will have a party. And then the next day she sent me up the road shopping. And I thought she said 10 flags. She actually said 10 fags.
There would be street parties where everybody would be home and the street would be closed. And they bring out all the wooden tables and put them all together.
And I can remember the chairs being down the middle of the road.
And sometimes they went quite a long way down the street.
I can also remember we had jam sandwiches, and I think there was a few cakes.
They put on a wonderful spread for us of blancmanges and jellies, and it was a wonderful spirit. It really was.
It went round the estate that there was a big bonfire outside the Eastney bus depot that was, And there were lots of people, and we were all singing and dancing. And it was either a Royal Marine or a sailor or a soldier. He took off his jacket and he threw it on the top, but nobody tried to tell him not to.
Soldiers swinging on lampposts and dancing and kissing all the girls. You can't describe the feeling of knowing the boys would be coming home.
A family living in the road whose father was taken prisoner, and I remember him coming up the road and everybody flying out to meet him as he walked up the road. Really, really lovely seeing him. Yeah.
Part of me tells me, forget it, let's get on. But another part of me, don't let it happen again.
In some ways, it seems that people say you make too much fuss about it. You keep bringing it all up. But you need to know or remember what happened to the countries. A lot of families had lost a lot of people.
Well, I think of all the boys that were lost, civilians and all, you know, that should have been living a wonderful life, and it was all taken away from them. You feel for them. I can't explain really in words, but it's a very important thing that we never ever forget them.